Hey, what is going on, guys? In today's video, I want to have a conversation about first impressions of the EZFN Season 4 test number 1 and what we can kind of expect moving into future tests as well as the final launch of the game. Now, there are supposed to be more tests coming, so things may change slightly for each test, but overall, I think we've got a good impression of what we can expect with Season 4 when it does come out. We're going to cover 5 key topics today, which is what can we expect for the full launch, like the date, servers, all of that. Notable quality of life features in Season 4, the major difference in building of Season 4 compared to Season 7, the overall weapon meta assessment, and then finally, the state of controller in Season 4. Now, the first topic, I think a lot of you are going to be asking, when can we expect a full launch? Now, unfortunately, I don't know the exact date that they're going to do a full launch, but they're saying that end of the week is around where they're targeting. That seems pretty reasonable to me. While Season 4, there were some issues. I was, talking to people. I know some of them had issues making the game work. It seemed like the vast majority of people were able to queue into matches and play. So that's a good sign. I think end of the week does seem reasonable, as that could be a possible launch. But we don't know for sure. There could be some hidden issue that we just don't know about. But end of the week seems reasonable. In terms of servers, I'd also like to say the first test was on only NA. EU should be available for when the full launch comes. So that should not be a concern. You'll be able to play on whichever server you get better ping, and EU, I suspect, will have much higher player counts, just like Season 7. In addition, more platform support will be coming. I think the next platform that's supposed to be working is iOS. It sounds like that's probably not going to be working for test number 2, but it's possible that it will be. We'll find out and see. Okay, let's move on to quality of life features. And the big one I want to talk about is Sprint by Default. Sprint by Default natively comes into the game in Season 5, and Sprint by Default, it just makes the game so much nicer, because think about it. Can you think of a situation where walking is better than sprinting? You really can't. It's just fundamentally better to be sprinting all the time, and having to manually press sprint every single time you stop running is really annoying after a while, especially once you get used to Sprint by Default. And the good news is that Sprint by Default in the test was automatically enabled. There was no launcher setting it to enable. You didn't have to press the insert key and hit a switch. It was always on. That's very good, and I'm really happy to see that, as the game is so much nicer to play. So there won't be any needs for adding in mods later. It's just there by default. Amazing. Let's move on to the state of building. Now, because we're on version 4.2, the state of building is very different compared to Season 7. It's very different than even Era Season 4, because Era Season 4 was on version 4.5. And in between those two, there's a major difference in turbo build speed, right? And later Season 4 and beyond, you have a delay of 0.05 seconds between each build piece. So you can place 20 build pieces a second. In this version, you have a 0.15 second delay, which means that you can only place just under 7 build pieces a second. That's massive, right? Building honestly feels very unresponsive. It's very slow. And what that means is it really changes the way you have to play the game, because mechanical skill and doing triple edits is just not feasible anymore. So it really prioritizes, can you position yourself correctly? You can't build as fast. Shotguns do a lot of damage against walls. So it really changes up the way the game plays. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just very different. And you might find that more enjoyable. You might find it less enjoyable. You're just going to have to try it out and see what you think. In terms of the overall weapon meta, this is very weird to say, but double pump is actually much weaker in Season 4 than it is in Season 7. It does a lot less body damage. The rate of fire is much slower in Season 4. Overall, it's just a lot more balanced. And what that means is that the close range meta as a whole is very interesting. There are a lot of choices to pick from. If you had watched my previous Season 4 What to Expect video, there are 6 really good competitive combos, but honestly, I can think of like 12 possible combinations that are viable, and it's a lot of fun, because between the pump shotgun, tac shotgun, heavy shotgun, standard AR, LMG, tac SMG, even silence SMG, maybe, you can find what weapons work well for you and mix those combos together and find a combo that you really like to use. And I'm really happy about that, because that means there's so many choices, and every player, no matter their playstyle, can find something they like. So really happy to see that. Unfortunately, though, the AR meta I just don't find as interesting. The purple and gold burst rifle aren't in the game at the moment, and what that means is really the SCAR is uncontested. While yes, the blue burst isn't bad, especially with controller at Synergy as well, I just don't think the blue burst is good enough to be the weapon that is going to compete against the gold SCAR. I just don't think it's there. The LMG is also a pseudo AR, really doesn't compete that well. It has so much bloom. Scope 3R just doesn't do enough damage at this point. The Scar is really the only option at higher rarities, but at lower rarities, there are some other options. So, not the best AR meta, but it is what it is. You know, snipers, you really only have the bolt action and the hunting rifle to choose from. The semi-auto only does 66 damage. Not very good there. So, overall, I think the other, metas aren't as interesting, but it's more than made up for by the close range meta being very fun. Finally, I want to talk about the state of controller. Controller custom binds are not natively supported until Season 6, and that makes controller very awkward to play. It's just a very difficult experience when you start rebinding and having to go back to the default binds. That can be very frustrating. Now, the good news I can say is that when I've spoken to people at EZFN, the custom binds mod from Era Season 5, you remember, it's been a very long time, but that mod gave you maybe 80% functionality of custom binds is supposed to get whitelisted for the next test. Now, I haven't confirmed if that's true, but what that should mean is it should make controller a lot more usable, as you're able to rebind the vast majority of your buttons. You still won't have a build and edit sense. You still won't be able to fix the edit button. Sometimes can't be binded correctly. But overall, that should really help controller feel a lot more usable. L2 also is very powerful in Season 4. There's no L2 cooldown like Season 7. And if you know how to use L2 correctly, you can be devastatingly effective. Overall, what this means is I think controller is going to be much more focused on using L2 than mechanical skill, as without a build and edit sense, controller building is nowhere near what keyboard and mouse is. And I think it's really going to be focused on, can you use L2 really well? And if you can absolutely dominate. Getting into box fights is not going to be your strong suit. Without a build sense, you're just going to struggle to keep up. Not that you can't be good on controller. There are plenty of controller players I can think of that are going to be very good, even with limited settings. But I think for your average player, learning how to use L2 is going to be your fastest way to success. But again, depends on your playstyle. And with that, I hope this video was entertaining. I'm excited to see what the next tests have for us, and I will catch you in the next one.